Today, we're diving into a story that starts with a family's beautiful dream of a new life and ends in an absolute nightmare. This is the tragic case of the Chohan family.
I mean, seriously, think about that question for a second. How does that even happen? It sounds like something out of a thriller, but for one family, it became their terrifying reality. Let's dig into how a happy family could just vanish.
Okay, so to really understand the weight of this story, we first have to meet the people at the heart of it all. Because their dreams for the future are what make what happened next so unbelievably tragic.
So you've got Amarjeet Chohan. He's running this really successful freight company in West London. He and his wife Nancy are busy raising their two little boys, Devinder and Ravinder. And to top it all off, Nancy's mom, Charanjeet, had even moved in with them to help out. They were this close-knit family, and they had this big shared dream. Amarjeet was planning to sell the business, retire early, and move the whole family to India. Nancy really felt it would be a better place to raise the boys.
You know, Nancy's brother, Onkar, he lived all the way over in New Zealand, but they were always on the phone. And he said you could just hear the joy in his sister's voice when she talked about it. She was so proud of her husband, her kids. Their whole future looked so incredibly bright.
And then, that beautiful picture of family life just shatters. It turns into this sudden, chilling mystery. In just a matter of days, that bright future was completely snuffed out. It all happened so fast. On February 13, 2003, Amarjeet leaves for a meeting with some people who are supposedly interested in buying his company. He never comes home. The very next day, a frantic Nancy calls her brother Onkar. Then on the 15th, she gets a voicemail from Amarjeet that must have sent a chill down her spine. And then, just 2 days after that, Nancy, her two boys, and her mother, they're gone too.
You know, the first real red flag that something was deeply wrong actually came from Amarjeet himself. See, he was always leaving these fun, playful voice messages for Nancy, and he'd always speak in Punjabi. But this one was totally different. It was in English, it sounded stiff and formal, completely out of character. For Nancy, that must have been a horrifying clue that her husband was in serious trouble.
So obviously alarmed that he can't reach his sister anymore, Onkar Roma gets on a plane and flies straight to London. He knew his family. He knew they wouldn't just leave without a word, and he started pushing the police, hard, to investigate.
And when the police finally got into the Chohan's home, what they found proved Onkar was right. It was like walking into a moment frozen in time. There was still food on the dining table, the kids' toys were scattered all over the floor, and right there on a table were all their passports and their plane tickets to India. But maybe the most telling detail of all, Charanjeet Kaur's sacred prayer book. Her family knew, without a doubt, she would never have left that behind willingly. And then, just nothing. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. There was complete silence. No calls, no emails, no money taken out of their bank accounts. It was as if the Chohan family had just been erased from existence.
And then, the worst fears of everyone who loved them started to become a reality. Over the next few months, 3 bodies were discovered, pulled from the sea. They were identified as Amarjeet, Nancy, and Charanjeet Kaur. So with the case now a triple murder investigation, police zeroed in on the family's business, Seba Freight. And that's when they found a man who had, for all intents and purposes, just stepped right into Amarjeet's life.
The man who took over the company was a guy named Kenneth Regan. And here's the really tragic irony. Regan was a known criminal who Amarjeet had hired to give a second chance. Amarjeet had his own past legal troubles, so he felt for the guy. He trusted him. But right after the family vanished, Regan just shows up with paperwork supposedly signed by Amarjeet, naming him the new director of the company.
Well, that obviously put a giant target on Regan's back. So police immediately dug into his phone records, and what they found was just incredible. On February 13th, the exact day Amarjeet disappeared, Regan's phone was pinging in the same location as Amarjeet's phone. And they weren't alone. 2 other guys, William Hornsey and Peter Rees, their phones were there too. All 4 phones tracked to a single address, Regan's father's house. This mobile phone data was a massive breakthrough. It connected the suspects to the victim on the day he vanished. But the police still needed that one thing, that final piece of evidence that could physically place Amarjeet in their hands.
And then, a tip came in. A woman reported that Regan and his buddies had been digging on our farm right after the family went missing, saying they were just building a drainage ditch. When police went to check it out, they found hairs that matched Amarjeet and jewelry that belonged to Nancy. It was damning.
But the final, irrefutable, knockout piece of evidence didn't come from a witness or a crime scene. It came from Amarjeet Chohan himself. It was a message he must have hidden, knowing it was his very last hope for justice.
Tucked deep inside one of his socks, forensic investigators found a folded letter. And the address on that letter was for Kenneth Regan's house. It was the smoking gun. In his final, terrifying hours, Amarjeet Chohan was being held captive at the home of the very man he had tried to help.
With this letter from the grave, as it came to be known, prosecutors now had everything they needed. All the pieces of this horrifying puzzle clicked into place, and they revealed a plot born from staggering cruelty and greed.
So the police pieced it all together. The motive was pure, cold-blooded greed. Regan had lured Amarjeet to that meeting not to buy his company, but to take it. He and his accomplices held Amarjeet captive for days, forcing him to sign over his multi-million-pound business. Their plan? To use Sibeth Freight as a cover for drug smuggling. Once they had what they wanted, they murdered Amarjeet. And then, to make sure there were no witnesses left to talk, they went to his home and they murdered his wife, his mother-in-law, and his 2 little boys.
In the end, justice, in a legal sense, was served. Kenneth Regan and William Hornsey both got life in prison for the murders of the entire family. Peter Reese was sentenced to 23 years for his part in murdering Amarjeet.
But for what's left of the family, like Onkar Varma, those verdicts bring very little comfort. His words are just this gut-wrenching reminder of the real people behind the headlines, of the baby sister whose happy life he was so desperate to protect.
The Chohan family's story is just a chilling testament to the absolute depths of cruelty that human beings are capable of, all in the name of greed.
Because even though the killers are behind bars, the story doesn't have a clean ending. There's a profound, heartbreaking injustice that remains. The bodies of those 2 little boys, Devinder and Ravinder, were never found. Their final resting place is still a mystery. The last, agonizing piece of a family's dream that was so brutally betrayed.